Uh, Good afternoon, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to this very important and interesting session as a speaker. Uh, Today, I'd like to report about our latest development of our urban carbon mapping of Tokyo under the COVID-19 situations. I'm from National Institute for Environmental Studies. Just a short introduction, self-introductions. Actually, I'm a system scientist and involving series of IPCC as a lead authors, and currently, especially focusing on the study of urban systems design from the viewpoint of urban resilience and uh, special big data analysis, especially for the urban systems design. So these are the books that I have recently published. So today's topic is based on these methods, and actually I'd like to report about our new studies about the impacts of COVID-19. So before going to this topic, I'd like to mention a little bit about this IPCC, because IPCC have a long history of trying to address the issue of climate change. But with the recognition that we actually need to implement decarbonizations on the ground, and we have created a new chapter called Urban System of the IPCC Working Group 3. So currently I'm working for the chapter as a lead author, and then in order to achieve this carbon dioxide emission decarbonization during this century, so we need to reduce the carbon to zero globally during the later half of this century. So which means that we need to decarbonize the most of the cities in the world. So for achieving this 2-degree goal, which is international treaty of Paris Agreement target. So comparing with the pre-industrial level temperature. So this is a hard target, but this is a really important things to achieve. Because of the time limit, I will skip this simulation for the climate change, but let me jump on to the topic of this carbon emissions and the impact of the COVID to the carbon emission. This is a time series data of global carbon dioxide emission over the last 30 years. So this is our global carbon projects data. And then last year, we thought maybe this could be a peak year for the carbon emissions. So we are looking forward to this year's carbon emission trajectory, how it can be, change the direction to increase to decrease due to the efforts of the, emission mitigation activities. But what happened actually is due to the COVID-19 impact, global carbon dioxide emissions have immediately reduced, surprisingly. Uh, at the beginning, I thought this could be a 5 or 10% impact, but actually this is as big as a 20% emission reduction. As you can see, this is the first wave, mostly China impacted, and the second wave is mostly Europe as impacted, and then now the third wave or fourth wave, and impacting the whole world. So if you look at the sector by sector, emission reductions, surface transport, mostly car reductions because nobody use a car during the lockdown in the cities. So this is the largest reduction, but other sectors also reduced so much. but only one sector, residential sector, have increased emissions due to the increase of the energy use at home, obviously. So this diagram shows how this impact have spread it over the world during this year. So starting from China and then shifted to Europe and then spread it all over the world. And it is by the end of May, and then it is continuing. So this is a background of this our study, and then my approach of the urban system design actually in trying to address these agenda by combining the use of the big data and other modeling activities to study the decarbonization, climate resiliency, and the regional symbiosis, local revitalizations associated with some of the SDGs. And some of the trade-offs exist among these objectives, so we need to optimize the considering the system interactions. City planning or city policy to manage the urban system is not an easy issue. We need to consider this complexity of the system of systems. But we need to achieve this goal, even in considering the decarbonization process of the cities. So very good news during this year for us is that, even in Japan, at the moment, starting from the last year, November, December, many cities started announcing the decarbonizations by 2050. Many governors and city mayors announced at this month, up to this month, 170 cities have already announced the decarbonization. But actually, this is just an announcement. So we need to seriously consider how we can achieve this decarbonization target step by step by the year 2050. So this shows how the Tokyo developed over the last 40, 50 years as a largest megacity. At the moment, 40 million people living in this one cities. So big question for this decarbonizations in Tokyo is how we can view this future urban form could be changed in Tokyo. And until this year, I have been struggling with this urban form issues, without considering about the impact of the corona. But so this household sector direct emissions, mostly by the use of the energy at home, and the business sector direct emissions from the offices and restaurant, other commercial buildings, and the transport sector direct emissions from the cars. The major sources of emissions. We have been studying how to reduce these emissions in combination with the change of the urban form in the future. So how we can achieve the compact cities so that the people can live near the train stations or using the public transport or walking or further suburbanizations, but with EV carbon neutral transport. So we are thinking about that. But the corona impacted the urban emission in the cities. So we need to pay attention to the spatial pattern and also the temporal changes of this carbon emission as a map. So this kind of map, this is one example in the United States done by my colleagues, Kevin Gooney. So this is a very early results show that the importance of this kind of carbon mapping for support carbon management at the city level. So we did the same things for Tokyo, and so by combining big data, building by building, information, what kind of type of the restaurant, what type of the residential houses, condominium, detached house, and how many square meters, or how many, guests, maximum office staff, something like this, for information gathered for building a building, and then overlay it with some of the measurement data, and also even with number of people visiting these offices and restaurants real time, using the big data, for instance, taking from the Google popular time data. So this is showing the occupancy of each building. So this kind of information were collected until last year, to as a proxy to estimate the energy use and the carbon dioxide emissions. But this year, the information has a different meaning. So because of the number of people in the building, offices, the restaurant is directly connected with COVID-19 infections risk. So it suddenly get another meanings. And also this GPS location information collected by the mobile phone locations of the application of the mobile phone company. We gathered all this kind of information, and we analyze the trajectory of each dot in the Tokyo for every minutes for 1 year, and analyze the data using machine learning techniques to classify into car, train, walking situation. Actually, I have a technical session tomorrow, so I don't go into the detail today, but we did this kind of building and transport carbon dioxide emission estimate using big data and some measurement and the statistical information in combination. So with this method, we could estimate this emission from the building sectors and transport sector like this. This is a north of Tokyo near the Sky Tree, the tallest tower in Japan. And this kind of visualizations sometimes very useful for the urban policymakers, or sometimes for the citizens too, to have a kind of intuitive understanding of the carbon emissions. And the decision of the Tokyo metropolitan government to reduce this to zero means that we need to reduce each emissions but in 30 years time. So this is important information. And then we also applied this method to monitor the impact of COVID-19 this year. So this is the Tokyo number of COVID infected people. So according to the increase in number of people in the cities actually reduced. So we also need to consider how the post-corona situation, considering the new lifestyle like a telework or a share office or as a lifestyle change. And also we also need to consider the new mobility system, because people are now afraid of going to the overcrowded train or bus, public transport. Even taxi is, of course, has a risk of infection. So maybe the autonomous vehicle it will be the solution in the future. So for coming up with this kind of new lifestyle-based urban systems design, we have looked at this Tokyo city emissions actually activities due to the building energy use and transport energy use. And this is one example of 1 day change over time. So this is a normal year, not this year. So people goes to the office and then use energy and then in the evening go back to home, and then car transport emit a lot of carbon, and then go to bed. And from here we showed some of the results this year, and this is a January, the end of January, last week, 1 week average of this year January. I actually traveled this time to the United States and actually visited in New York last week of the January. Surprising. I can never imagine to travel to New York now. But this is just this year beginning. So this activity, Tokyo, in the building energy use and transport energy use was not so much affected. Then at the end of the February, people start to recognize the risk of COVID-19 and then start worrying about going out, and then a little bit reduce. Then by the end of March, our prime minister immediately announced all school should be, closed. Then all of a sudden people started seriously worrying about and going out. And then actually, it's not a complete lockdown policy, but all government requested the people not going out in later April and then May. So only the central government and financial city have some, and also the Shinjuku major city center still a little bit active, but the other area not so much. And then June a little bit recovered. So during this period, we observed that the transport activity have released so much. So this shows a total average. This is a train. Number of people riding train have reduced 50%. The car is 40%. But very interestingly, in Tokyo, train company, JR, actually run the train according to the timetable, ordinary timetable. So actually the energy use for the train actually didn't change. Only the number of the passengers in the train have greatly reduced. But the number of car reduction is directly related to the energy reduction, and hence the carbon dioxide emissions. And the residential areas actually, according to our data, are observed to increase CO2 emissions 5%. But recently, we have actually gathered more accurate information, asking questionnaire household and business sectors, and they realize that this is underestimating the actual energy use in the residential sector. So because this is partially because we are using big data, GPS locations, as a proxy for the activity in the building. But if we go, people go into the condominium, concrete big buildings, then GPS disappear. Also the underground train, underground situation, GPS not observed. So there is a limitation of the use of the GPS. So we need to actually adjust this bias using the actual data. So this is just a tentative ongoing project. But lastly, most importantly, I'd like to mention that this is really important timing for us to think about so-called society got in 5.0, that is a more digital society, to consider the measures for cope with infectious diseases and the climate change risk management. Of course, carbon dioxide emissions is one thing, but of course the many other impacts like flooding or heat wave or whatever the climate change impact is happening in this situation in combination. This is a really scary thing. So in order to achieve this, we need to integrate mobility system using IT as a mobility as a service. And this is a Toyota's new concept. But actually, I'd like to propose a little bit larger framework to assess urban system level, what is the optimal use of the building and also optimal use of the transport in combination, considering other opportunities and risks. And so for that purpose, again, this is a research project proposal that we have in mind, proposing to the Ministry of the Environment at the moment, is to consider how the new lifestyle will impact and how we can design this new lifestyle, considering this new mobility service opportunity and also the new building use in the cities. It is impossible to rebuild, change the infrastructure quickly, but actually the building use is rapidly changing. Some of the major companies already trying to move from the city center to the more rural area, especially IT companies, and already selling their headquarter buildings, and people actually stay at home in a remote place, so they don't need to go to the office building anymore. So these kind of office building changes are happening. So we need to consider how this energy use could be changed in the future in combination with the urban form change and with simulations, and I need to assess the implication to the sustainability, including if COVID-19 or any other future infectious disease risks.
Sorry to interrupt, Professor. Okay. Okay, Professor Yamagata, that's really impressive, and thank you very much. The detail on the monitoring and data analysis is really impressive, and that's a nice segue to our next